Welcome, dear listener, to another gentle journey through the hushed corridors of history. Tonight, our path takes us to a place of standing stones and silent mysteries, to a monument older than writing, older even than most of the civilizations. We so often speak of we are going to wander among the builders of Stonehenge, to imagine their lives, their thoughts, and their quiet determination as they raised those immense stones toward the sky. Settle yourself into comfort, perhaps with a blanket tucked close, and allow the rhythm of this story to carry you into stillness. Let us begin in a world that feels both familiar and impossibly distant. The air is crisp, heavy with the scent of earth and grass after rain. The landscape stretches wide, rolling hills and open plains dotted with small clusters of wooden huts. The year is unknown to us, for these builders lived in a time before written dates. Yet through archaeology, through fragments of tools, bones, and fire pits, we can begin to piece together the outlines of their lives. We imagine them not as nameless shadows, but as men and women with families, with laughter, with worries, and with dreams. The builders of Stonehenge were farmers, tending fields of barley and wheat, caring for herds of cattle and sheep. By day, they tilled the soil with simple tools carved from wood and stone. By evening, they gathered around fires, telling stories as sparks drifted into the darkening sky. And in between these ordinary moments, they carried in their hearts an extraordinary vision, the raising of a circle of stones so massive, so enduring, that it would outlive them by thousands of years. It is important to understand that this was not one single generation's project. The monument we call Stonehenge was shaped, reshaped, and expanded over centuries. Imagine children who grew up watching their parents drag stones across the countryside, and who themselves would one day lead similar efforts. Picture generations of builders who added their own touch to the great circle, each one a chapter in a story without a single author. Now let us walk among them. The sun is low on the horizon, casting long golden rays across the grass. A group of villagers gathers at the edge of a forest, ropes in hand, preparing to move one of the smaller blue stones. These stones, weighing several tons each, were carried over vast distances, some from the mountains of Wales, more than 150 miles away. How did they accomplish this without wheels, without iron, without beasts of burden strong enough to carry such loads? Slowly, patiently, with ingenuity and sheer human effort. Logs were cut and placed beneath the stone to form a rolling path. Ropes of twisted fiber were wrapped tight. Dozens of people leaned forward together, step by step, shifting the enormous weight forward as chants rose into the air. Imagine the sound of ropes creaking, wood grinding against soil, and voices humming in unison to keep rhythm. These were not the hurried voices of conquest or battle. These were steady, deliberate sounds, echoes of determination that stretched across years. The children ran alongside, laughing, imitating the chants, not yet aware of the seriousness of the task. The elderly watched, perhaps recalling the stones they had moved in their own youth, offering guidance with quiet words. As night fell, torches flickered against the stone's rough surface. Work would often pause until dawn, for this was not a project of haste but of endurance. In the dark, villagers sat together, sharing food, tending fires, and watching the stars move slowly overhead. And here we find one of the keys to the mystery. For Stonehenge was not built at random. Its stones were aligned with the heavens, with the rising sun of midsummer and the setting sun of midwinter. To these people, the sky was a calendar, a guide, a silent companion in their daily lives. By aligning their stones with the movements of the sun, they bound earth and sky together in one grand design. Picture. Then, a young boy lying beside the fire, gazing upward. He sees the Milky Way spread across the night, brighter than we can imagine today without the glow of modern lights. He watches as the stars wheel slowly above, each night the same and yet subtly shifting as the seasons turn. His elders explain to him that the great stones they raise will one day mark those celestial rhythms forever. He listens, his eyes growing heavy, not realizing that he is falling asleep beside a vision that would last for thousands of years. Morning comes again, and the work continues. Food is brought in baskets, bread made from grain, meat roasted from the hunt. Builders eat together, sharing strength before returning to their ropes and levers. The great sarsen stones, towering up to 30 feet tall, were the heaviest of all. Some weighed more than 20 tons. To move them required not dozens, but hundreds of people. Teams spread across the land, cutting and dragging, shaping and hauling. These were community efforts, binding villages together in common purpose. There is a rhythm to their labor, almost meditative. One step, pause. Adjust the logs, another step. Sweat beads on brows, arms strain, but slowly the massive stones advance. When the ground slopes upward, the task becomes even more demanding. Earth ramps are built, rising like gentle hills, so that the stones can be pulled upward. The process is slow, painstaking, yet the people do not falter. For each stone that is set upright in the earth, there is a celebration. Drums beat, flutes sing, and voices rise in joy. The stone stands now, rooted deep, taller than any person. Silent, yet alive with meaning. The meaning, of course, is something we can only guess at. Was Stonehenge a temple to the sun? A burial ground for honored ancestors? A place of healing? Perhaps it was all these things, or something else entirely. To its builders, the stones were not mute. They carried memory, purpose, and power. Each one stood as a witness to the people who raised it, and to the sky that turned above it. Let us pause here and think of the builders themselves. Not only their labor, but their inner worlds. They lived lives filled with ordinary concerns. A mother sang softly to her child, rocking him gently as the distant sound of stone moving echoed in the background. A young man sharpened his flint tool, his hands steady though his thoughts wandered to the feast that would follow the stones. Raising, an elder woman whispered blessings over a meal, thanking the earth and the spirits for the strength to see another day. Within these small moments lay the same human warmth we know today, though wrapped in a world of wood, stone, and sky. As the great circle began to rise, life continued around it. Crops grew in the fields, herds moved across the grasslands, and fires burned through the long nights of winter. But the monuments stood slowly taking shape, year after year, a constant presence, like a mountain created not by nature but by human will. To walk among those stones was to feel the passage of time itself, each upright stone a reminder of generations past. Each lintel across the top a symbol of connection. Imagine walking between them now, the air cool, the stones towering above, their surfaces weathered but still strong. In the distance, the low sound of a horn echoes, calling the community to gather. It is midsummer's dawn. The builders rise early, walking barefoot across dew-soaked grass. They assemble in silence, waiting as the first rays of the sun break across the horizon. And then it happens. The light shines directly through the stones. illuminating the heart of the circle. Gasps of wonder rise from the crowd, not from surprise, but from deep recognition. The world is aligned, heaven and earth joined. The people and their monument in perfect harmony with the sky. This was the reward for their labor, not wealth or conquest, but belonging. Belonging to the land, to the seasons, to the turning of the heavens. The stones stood as anchors in a world that was always shifting, always changing. They gave form to time itself, something tangible to mark the invisible cycles of life. And so the builders lived and died, their names forgotten, but their work enduring. Children grew into adults, adults aged into elders, and all the while the stones remained silent witnesses to births, to feasts, to farewells. When a loved one was buried within the circle, it was not only an act of grief, but of continuity. The ancestors became part of the monument, their spirits joining the stones in silent guardianship. The circle of life, the circle of stones, the circle of the sky above. All these patterns wove together into something larger than any one person. This was the gift the builders gave themselves and to all who would come after them. Not only a monument of stone, but a reminder of connection, of community, and of patience. As you rest here in this story, let yourself feel the stillness of the stones. They do not rush, they do not demand, they simply stand, enduring, offering their quiet presence across the ages. Listen to the imagined wind moving softly across the plain, to the faint sound of a distant drum, to the murmur of voices long gone. Allow those sounds to fade gently, like waves receding from the shore. The builders of Stonehenge are silent now, but their silence speaks across thousands of years. It tells us of strength, of vision, of human hearts bound to the turning sky. And it invites us to rest as they once did, beneath stars bright and eternal, with the comfort of stones standing watch nearby. So close your eyes, dear listener, and drift into the calm that their world still offers. Let the great stones keep their vigil as you slip into sleep, carried gently by the memory of the silent builders. You are still with the builders, still among the rolling hills where great stones rise against the sky. The first part of our journey showed us how those stones began to stand, how people pulled them across the land, how the circles slowly took shape, but their story does not end with the raising of stones. Tonight, we walk deeper into their lives, into the rituals, the celebrations, and the quiet meanings that made Stonehenge not only a monument, but the heartbeat of an entire community. Imagine, if you will, a midwinter evening. The air is sharp, the grass crunches underfoot. The builders gather round fires at the edge of the monument. Sparks leap upward, vanishing into a dark sky heavy with stars. Children sit wrapped in animal skins, wide-eyed, waiting for the ceremony. To begin, the elders stand near the great stones, their hands raised in gestures that speak of memory and reverence. Midwinter was no ordinary day. For these people, the long night carried both fear and hope. It was the moment when the sun sank lowest in the sky, when darkness seemed ready to swallow the world. And yet, they believed, if they honored the turning of the seasons, the light would return and life with it. So they gathered in the circle, not only to watch the heavens, but to remind themselves that they were not alone in the vastness. Torches flickered against stone surfaces, shadows dancing across the towering faces. Then silence fell. In that silence, the crowd waited, breath held, as the sun's last rays sank between the uprights of the western stones. A hush swept through the people, and then a deep sigh of recognition, as though the entire community exhaled in unison. The stones had caught the light again. The world was still aligned. The promise of spring was safe. This rhythm of light and stone shaped their entire year. Festivals were timed to these moments. Harvests were measured by them. The people came to Stonehenge not only for ceremony, but for reassurance. They lived in a world where weather was unpredictable, where crops could fail, where sickness could spread without warning. But the stones were steady. The stones told them that time would turn, that the sun would return, that their lives fit into a larger pattern. Now picture the days between festivals. Life did not pause simply because the stones had been raised. Families worked their fields, tended their animals, repaired their huts. Yet the monument always loomed in the distance, visible across the plain. Its presence was a reminder that every ordinary act of living was also part of a greater story. When a mother ground grain to make bread, when a child fetched water from the stream, when a man carved tools of flint, all these acts were woven into the same world that the stones had marked. Let us follow one family. A young woman wakes before dawn, her breath visible in the cool air of early spring. She steps quietly so as not to wake her infant, wrapped and sleeping beside the hearth. Her husband is already outside, mending the fence for their cattle. She begins grinding grain, the steady rhythm of stone against stone echoing softly in the hut. Later, she will carry food to the workers who shape new timbers for the monument's wooden structures. Though she does not lift the great stones herself, she knows she is part of the same work. Each loaf she bakes, each basket she fills, is fuel for the vision of the builders. Their children grow up with the circle of stones as their backdrop. They play hide and seek among the half-completed uprights, their laughter ringing out against the cold stone. They chase each other through the grass, their small footprints mingling with the deep grooves left by dragging sledges. For them, the stones are not mysterious. They are simply home, as natural as hills and rivers. They do not yet know that in far distant centuries, others will look at these stones with wonder, with questions, with awe. At times, feasts were held within the circle. Deer and cattle were roasted over large fires, and the smell of meat drifted. For miles, people came not only from nearby villages, but from far across the land, perhaps even from distant valleys and mountains. Some traveled for days, carrying with them gifts of pottery, tools, or ornaments. The gathering was more than a festival. It was a reunion, a chance for clans to meet, to exchange goods, to arrange marriages, to strengthen alliances. The stones stood at the center of these human bonds, silent yet essential. Now imagine the sounds: drums beaten with steady hands, bone flutes whistling high above the deeper hum of chanting voices, the rhythmic stamping of feet against earth. These were not random celebrations, but carefully timed rituals. Each note, each step, each offering was part of a dialogue between people and the world they lived in. They gave their songs to the stones, and in return, the stones gave them certainty. Yet not every moment was joyous. Sometimes people came to Stonehenge in sorrow. Within the circle, burials took place. Graves were dug, ashes interred, offerings laid beside the dead. For these builders, death was not the end, but a passage. The circle of stones, aligned with sun and sky, offered assurance that the departed moved into the eternal rhythm as well. The stones guarded them, just as they guarded the living. Imagine mourners standing quietly as a body is laid to rest, their grief softened by the knowledge that the stones would keep watch forever. Archaeologists have found traces of illness. an injury in the remains around Stonehenge. Some people came here not only for ceremony, but for healing. The bluestones, in particular, were thought to hold special powers. They had been brought from great distances, across rivers and mountains, and this journey imbued them with significance. People believed the stones carried the strength of the earth itself. Imagine a mother leading her ailing child into the circle, placing his hand against the cool stone, whispering prayers that health might return. Whether the stones healed or not, the act itself gave comfort, and sometimes comfort is enough. The builders lived in close connection with the land. They knew the patterns of migrating birds, the flowering of plants, the tracks of animals across the soil. They watched rivers swell with spring rains, then recede in summer's warmth. Their lives were bound to these rhythms, and so too was their monument. Stonehenge was not separate from nature. It was nature shaped into human form, a mirror of the cycles they observed all around them. Think now of the night sky once more. With no lights to drown it, the heavens stretched vast and luminous. Constellations shone clearly, guiding travelers, marking seasons, inspiring myths. Around the fires, stories were told, of great hunters among the stars, of animals frozen in the sky, of spirits who watched from above. Children drifted to sleep to the sound of these tales, their dreams filled with both fear and wonder. In this way, knowledge passed not only through stones and rituals, but through words whispered in the dark. Seasons turned, years passed, generations shifted. The monument continued to change. Stones were added, others rearranged. Wooden posts were erected, then replaced by stone. Each alteration carried meaning, though that meaning is hidden from us now. What we do know is that the builders never stopped imagining, never stopped shaping their world. To them, the stones were alive, not finished objects, but companions growing. Alongside them, let us stand once more at midsummer dawn. The air is filled with anticipation. People have gathered from far away, their footsteps converging on the plain. As the first rays of sunlight pierce the horizon, striking directly through the heart of the circle, a cheer rises. Hands lift to the sky, voices cry out in joy. The sun is reborn, the year renewed. For a moment, all worries vanish, replaced by a feeling of harmony. The people belong to the stones, and the stones belong to the sky. And when the festival is done, when the fires burn low and the crowd disperses, the stones remain, silent, unmoving, watching over the land. They do not sleep, they do not tire, they wait, as they have always waited, as they still wait now. The story of the silent builders continues, but tonight we pause here, rest among their stones, feel the weight of their patience, the calm of their endurance. Let your thoughts slow, let your breath match the rhythm of the turning seasons. For in the quiet presence of Stonehenge, even across thousands of years, there is peace. So close your eyes and let the builders keep their watch as you drift gently into sleep. The fires of midsummer faded into ash, but the memory of light remained in the hearts of those who had gathered. In the weeks that followed, the people spoke often of the way the sun had struck through the stones, of the feeling of unity that had passed through them like a single breath. Each festival left behind not only smoke and footprints, but a sense of renewal, a reminder that their place in the world was secure so long as they kept faith with the stones and the sky above. As autumn drew near, another rhythm took hold. The fields ripened, stalks of barley swayed heavy with grain, and families prepared for the harvest. Yet even in the busiest days of gathering, thoughts turned to the circle of stones. Some said the monument itself blessed the crops, ensuring fertility of soil and strength of seed. Offerings were laid at the base of the uprights, carved antlers, polished flints, beads of bone and shell. The people believed that giving to the stones was giving to the earth itself, a way of returning thanks for all that had been received. There were whispers too, stories told in hushed voices by the fires. Some claimed the stones had spirits within them, guardians who listened when the wind howled through the openings. Others said that long before the first stone was ever raised, the land itself had chosen the place, that the circle was merely revealing what had always been sacred. The children listened wide-eyed, holding close to their mothers, half afraid and half enchanted during long nights of winter. When cold pressed against the walls of their huts and the sky seemed endless and dark, the builders told myths of creation. They spoke of a great serpent that once coiled through the land, carving rivers with its body, and of how the stones were placed along its path to pin it down, to keep its power from swallowing the world. They spoke of ancestors who had become stars, watching silently, guiding the living through the cycles of life and death. And always, at the center of these stories, stood the circle, not only as stone, but as symbol. By day, rituals unfolded within. The monument, the sound of drums carried across the plain, steady as a heartbeat. Men and women painted their faces with ochre, their hair braided with feathers, their bodies moving in rhythm around the stones. At times they danced in silence, each step measured, each gesture deliberate, as though their movements themselves were part of a dialogue with the unseen. At other times their voices rose in chants, echoing from stone to stone, filling the circle, with sound that seemed to lift into the sky. The blue stones held particular power in these moments. Visitors from far away came to touch them, to sit beside them, to pray. Some were brought on stretchers, sick or wounded, hoping for healing. Others arrived bearing gifts, finely worked axes, delicate ornaments, even animals to be sacrificed. In gratitude, the monument was not only for those who built it, but for many who traveled across the land to seek its blessings. Imagine walking among them. The air smells of smoke and earth. The cold surface of stone presses cool against your palm. All around, people move slowly, their footsteps soft on the grass, their faces lit by firelight. You hear the murmur of prayers in languages you do not know, carried here by travelers from valleys and shores you have never seen. The circle gathers them all, binding strangers into one moment of reverence. As centuries passed, the monument became layered with memory. Each generation added new meaning, just as they added new stones or reshaped old ones. What one group saw as a temple to the sun, another saw as a house of the dead, while still another believed it to be a bridge between worlds. None of them were wrong, for Stonehenge was vast enough to contain many truths. Its silence absorbed all meanings without judgment, standing patiently as people wove their lives around it. There were darker tales as well, spoken cautiously. Some believed the stones demanded sacrifice, that only through blood could the cycles be maintained. Archaeologists today debate whether such things happened, but to the builders, even the rumor was powerful. Fear mingled with reverence, for anything strong enough to hold the sun's path, to guard the dead, to heal the living, was also strong enough to demand a price. So animals were offered, their bones buried in pits, their lives given to ensure the balance of seasons. The builders themselves lived ordinary struggles beneath this weight of meaning. Winters could be cruel, and hunger was no stranger. Illness swept through their huts, taking the old, sometimes even the young, yet even in grief they found comfort in the stones. A mother mourning her child might walk to the circle at dawn, standing in the cold until light spilled across the horizon, whispering words no one else would hear. To her, the stones listened. To her, the sky answered. Life was never static. Trade routes stretched across the land, bringing new ideas, new objects, new people. Some who came were welcomed, others regarded with suspicion, yet the stones absorbed them all, becoming a gathering place not only for locals but for distant travelers. Around fires, accents mingled, stories were exchanged, and in the act of sharing, the circle grew larger in spirit than in stone. The builders grew old, their hands rough from work, their bodies bearing the marks of labor. One by one, they returned to the earth, their ashes sometimes scattered within the monument they had helped to raise. Children carried on their work, never knowing the names of those who had first envisioned the circle, yet feeling their presence with every step. Generations blurred into one another, until the monument itself became the only witness long enough to remember them all. Through it all, the seasons turned, the stars wheeled, and the stones endured. Rain darkened their surfaces, frost etched delicate crystals across their faces, moss crept into their crevices. But still they stood, silent companions to all who came and went. For the builders, this endurance was the greatest miracle of all. They lived brief, fragile lives, but the stones endured, carrying their hopes forward into futures they could not imagine. And so the story of the builders continued, not in sudden revelations, but in slow, patient rhythms, the pull of rope against stone, the chant of voices in the dark, the hush of a crowd watching sunlight pierce the circle. These moments wove together into a tapestry far greater than any single person, greater even than any single generation. It was a tapestry of connection, binding earth and sky, life and death, past and future. The stones remain still, bearing their silent testimony. They are more than rock, more than monument. They are memory made solid, patience given shape, the enduring whisper of people who lived, who dreamed, who built. And though their voices are long gone, their presence continues, quiet as the night sky, steady as the turning of the seasons, eternal as the rhythm of life itself. The years moved forward, one season folding gently into the next, until lifetimes stretched like ripples across the plain. Yet even as generations passed, the circle of stones remained, steady as a horizon, unshaken by the passing of time. To those who lived in its shadow, Stonehenge was more than a place. It was a companion, a keeper of memory, a mirror to the sky above and the earth beneath. Travelers arrived from valleys beyond the hills, from coasts where waves struck hard against cliffs, from forests where light barely reached the ground. They carried with them shells from the sea, antlers from distant hunts, and stones shaped by other rivers. Each offering was laid within or near the circle, as though the monument was a great vessel into which the land itself poured its gifts. In this way, Stonehenge became a gathering not only of people but of places, a meeting of landscapes bound together by the will of human hands. On certain nights, when the moon was high and full, the builders and their visitors gathered to trace its path across the sky. They noticed how the silver light struck the stones differently than the golden light of the sun. Some believed the moon marked the passage of souls, guiding the dead into the other world, while the sun belonged to the living. The circle, aligned with both, became a bridge between the two realms. In silence, they watched the pale glow drift, across stone surfaces, and in their hearts they felt the presence of those who had gone before. The myths grew richer with every telling. Children whispered that the stones themselves could walk at night, stepping slowly across the plain when no eyes watched. Elders claimed they had seen shadows move where no flame burned, heard echoes where no voice had spoken. To some, the monument was the work of giants, beings too strong and ancient to be fully remembered. To others, it was a gift from spirits, who had lent their strength to mortal hands. Though their stories differed, all agreed on one truth. The stones were alive in a way ordinary earth was not. They were not simply objects, but beings with presence, with patience, with watchful silence. To lean against them was to feel a heartbeat, not of blood, but of time itself. As centuries turned, the builder's world expanded. New settlements rose. In valleys, rivers bore traders from far regions, and the plain itself grew busier with travelers. Stonehenge became a center not only for ritual but for exchange. Goods passed from hand to hand, obsidian from distant mountains, copper from far mines, beads of amber carried from northern coasts. In return, those who came carried home stories of the circle, spreading its name until it reached places the builders themselves had never seen. With this expansion came change. Beliefs shifted as new ideas mingled with old ones. Some saw the monument as a temple of healing, a place where water drawn from its ditch could cure sickness. Others believed it to be the home of ancestors, whose spirits dwelled between the great uprights. Still others whispered of the stars, suggesting that the circle was a map of the heavens, that its stones were aligned not only with the sun and moon, but with constellations drifting eternally across the night. Imagine the scene of one such night. The air is cool, and 1,000 stars burn bright above. Fires flicker low, their smoke curling skyward. People lie upon the grass within the circle, staring upward, tracing patterns across the vast expanse. A storyteller's voice rises, naming each cluster, weaving it into myth. The stones seem to lean inward, as though listening. For a moment, earth and sky feel like mirrors, each reflecting the other in silent wonder. Though their lives were harsh, though winters froze their breath, and summers scorched the fields, the builders carried within them a profound sense of belonging. Every hardship, every joy, every birth and burial was part of a greater rhythm. To them, the circle was not only a monument of stone, but a promise that life had meaning, that death was not the end, that the cycles would continue long after their own steps had faded. In time, new generations added their own layers. Wooden posts once stood near the stones, marking paths and boundaries, only to be replaced or abandoned as centuries passed. Earthworks shifted, ditches filled, banks were reshaped. To the outside eye, the monument might have seemed incomplete, forever changing, but to the builders, it was alive, never fixed, always breathing with the flow of human intention. Even the animals carried meaning within the circle. Cattle bones have been found, their presence suggesting feasts or sacrifices. To give an animal was to give a piece of sustenance, a fragment of survival itself. Fires blazed bright as meat roasted, feeding hundreds, perhaps thousands. The smell of smoke and fat carried on the wind, mingling with laughter and song. These were not somber events, but vibrant gatherings, times when hardship gave way to abundance, and strangers became kin beneath the watch of the stones. And yet, beneath the feasting and the music, there was always silence. Silence deeper than the murmur of voices, silence that seemed to press against the skin whenever one stood alone in the circle. It was the silence of stone, of weight, of centuries waiting to unfold. Those who built the monument may not have fully understood why they did so, but they felt its pull nonetheless. It was as if the earth itself had whispered the idea into their dreams, guiding their hands to fulfill a destiny beyond their knowing. The children of builders grew old. They left behind bones and ashes, scattered across the plain, buried within. The monument itself, their names were forgotten, their faces lost. And yet their presence lingers still, for the stones they raised remain. They are the voices of the voiceless, the memory of those who lived without written word, but not without meaning. Look closely, and you might imagine their lives continuing even now. A man kneels by a fire, carving wood into tools. A woman hums softly as she grinds grain. Children laugh as they chase each other between the stones. The air is filled with smoke, with song, with the steady rhythm of life. Though thousands of years have passed, their essence endures. Caught in the great circle they built, Stonehenge is not merely history, it is continuity, a thread stretching from ancient builders to the present moment. Its stones have watched the rise and fall of kingdoms, the march of armies, the birth of nations. They have stood through storms and droughts, through centuries of silence, through the footsteps of countless generations who came to wonder at their mystery, and still they endure, silent, patient, watching. The builders may be gone, their voices vanished into wind, but the stones keep their story alive. They speak without words, reminding all who see them that we too are part of the same rhythm, brief as sparks in the long night, yet woven into the eternal turning of the world. The plain stretched wide, a vast openness where the wind carried the scent of earth and grass, where horizons seemed endless, and where the circle of stones stood tall against the sky. To those who gathered there, the land itself felt sacred. But the monument gave it shape, gave it focus, gave it permanence. For the builders, there was no separation between earth and sky, between stone and spirit, between life and death. All of it was part of one great rhythm, one song that never ceased. As seasons turned again, the people who lived near the stones found themselves returning often, not only during the great festivals, but also in moments of solitude. A man might walk the path at dawn, carrying nothing but his thoughts. A woman might bring water to pour at the base of a stone, watching it sink slowly into the soil. Small gestures built over time into layers of devotion. They did not need to speak of belief, for it was woven into every action, into every glance at the circle on the horizon. Children grew up in its presence, seeing the stones as eternal, as unchanging as the sun and moon. They played between the uprights, running in and out of the shadows, their laughter echoing against the hard surfaces. To them, the circle was both playground and mystery. They could not yet understand the weight of meaning, but they felt the pull of it nonetheless. And as they grew older, they carried those feelings forward, folding them into the traditions of adulthood. At night, when fires burned low and the stars stretched across the sky, families sat together telling stories. Some tales explained how the stones came to be. Others warned of what might happen should the circle ever be neglected. A father might point to the horizon and speak of ancestors walking among the stars. A grandmother might describe how the stones themselves drank the light of the sun and returned it as blessings upon the earth. Each tale, no matter how small, became part of the living fabric of the monument. Travelers added their voices to these stories. From far valleys they came, drawn by whispers of a great circle where sky and earth were joined. Some brought gift stools, carved with care, beads strung with shells, bones polished to gleaming smoothness. Others brought nothing but their presence, their steps across the plain, their eyes wide with wonder. All were received. All became part of the story. In the quiet of the monument, time itself seemed to move differently. Within the circle, hours felt longer, as though the stones stretched them out. A moment of silence could feel eternal, while a festival could pass in what seemed like a single breath. Those who stood between the uprights often spoke of feeling lifted out of themselves, as though they had stepped into a place not bound by the ordinary rules of life. It was this sense of timelessness that gave rise to ritual. People gathered not only to mark the seasons, but to anchor themselves in the flow of existence. The circle was a calendar, a temple, a graveyard, a sanctuary. It was all these things. At once, shifting meaning as easily as the sky shifted color from dawn to dusk. The builders may never have used words like sacred or eternal, but they lived those truths each time they raised their eyes to the stones. Winter came again, harsh winds sweeping across the plain, frost biting at the earth. Food grew scarce, and hardship settled heavily over the huts. Yet even then, the stones stood tall, their presence a reminder of endurance. Families huddled close to their fires, telling stories to keep hope alive. And when the solstice approached, they rose before dawn, walking together to the monument, stamping their feet against the cold, waiting for the first touch of sunlight. The moment the rays pierced the circle, a cheer rose into the frozen air, voices lifting against the sky. For that instant, all hunger and cold were forgotten, replaced by awe and gratitude. Such moments bound the community together. Every person felt themselves part of something larger, something that stretched beyond their own brief lives. To raise a child, to harvest grain, to mourn a loss all, these things found place within the greater rhythm of the circle. The stones did not erase suffering, but they gave it meaning. They reminded the people that life was not random, that each season followed the next, that each ending was also a beginning. Among the builders, some carried special roles. There were those who watched the sky, marking the patterns of sun and moon, knowing when the next festival should be held. There were those who guided ritual, leading chants, lifting hands in prayer. And there were those who cared for the dead, laying bones with tenderness, speaking softly as though the departed could still hear. Each role was honored, each necessary for the balance of the whole. But there was no single owner of the stones. The monument belonged to all, to every hand that had dragged a rope, to every voice that had chanted, to every child that had played between the uprights. It was the heart of the community, and through it, the heart of the world. In time travelers carried stories of the monument farther than the builders could have imagined. Across rivers and forests, the name of the Great Circle spread. Some who heard of it came in curiosity, others came in reverence. Each journey added another thread to the tapestry of meaning. For though the stones were rooted firmly in the soil of the plain, their presence reached far beyond. There were those who believed the stones healed not only bodies but spirits. They came with burdens heavy upon their hearts, with grief too deep to carry alone. Sitting in silence within the circle, they felt the weight ease, as though the stones themselves absorbed sorrow. Others came with hope, asking for fertility, for harvest, for safety in travel. Whether these prayers were answered none could say, but those who left carried with them a sense of peace, a sense that they had been heard. The builders themselves may never have asked what the circle meant in total. To them, it was not a puzzle but a way of life. They did not stand apart from it, trying to define it, but lived within it, letting meaning unfold naturally. To build, to gather, to worship, to celebrate, these acts were not separate from life, but life itself. Years became centuries, and still the stones endured. They weathered storms, stood through drought, outlasted the rise and fall of countless generations. Each new layer of life added depth to their silence. Each story, each offering, each prayer became part of the monument. And so the builders, though long gone, remained present. Their voices carried forward not in words, but in stone. To stand within the circle today is to feel the echo of their lives. The grass may have changed, the air may be filled with different sounds, but the weight of history remains. The stones are not ruins, they are reminders. They whisper of a time when humanity lived close to the rhythm of earth and sky, when belief and survival were woven seamlessly together, when the line between the sacred and the ordinary was no line at all. And though we may never know the full truth of why the builders raised them, perhaps that is not the point. Perhaps the meaning lies not in explanation, but in experience. To walk among the stones is to join the countless footsteps that came before, to share in the silence that has endured for millennia, to feel oneself part of the same eternal rhythm. The builders are gone, but the circle remains. Their voices are quiet, but their song continues. And in that song, whispered by wind, echoed in stone, carried across time, we are reminded that we too are part of the same story, that our lives too are woven into the endless turning of the world. The circle of stones did not end with those who first raised them. Time moved forward, carrying generations with it, while the monument remained rooted, steady as the hills, patient as the stars. The builders had poured their strength into the uprights, but their children and their children's children carried its meaning onward. The circle became more than a memory of those who had lifted ropes and carved stone. It became a vessel of continuity, holding within it the breath of every life that touched its ground. As the years unfolded, the plains surrounding the stones changed. New paths were carved by countless footsteps. Wooden posts were raised and fell, replaced and forgotten. The huts of the builders were long gone, their thatched roofs returned to earth, their fires extinguished. Yet still, people came. Some came in joy, carrying children in their arms. Others came in grief, their faces drawn, seeking solace in silence. All found something in the presence of the stones, though none could fully name it. Slowly, the people themselves changed. New groups arrived from distant lands, carrying different tongues, new ways of farming, new shapes of pottery, new tools of metal shining in the sun. They looked upon the great circle with awe, as those before them had done. To some, it was a place of ancestors, guardians who watched over the land. To others, it was a temple of gods, vast and eternal, built not by men but by forces beyond mortal reach. The old ways and the new began to weave together. Rituals shifted, offerings altered, but the heart of the circle remained the same. It was a place where earth and sky touched, where human lives brushed against something greater. The newcomers did not erase the meaning of the stones. They added to it, layering new prayers upon the old, new hopes upon ancient dreams. Even as centuries rolled forward, the stones did not lose their voice. In summer, they drank the light of the solstice sun, spilling it across the plain in golden fire. In winter, they held the low light of the solstice dawn, promising the return of warmth. Between these extremes, the moon continued its dance, silver and soft, carving shadows across the circle. And still, the people gathered to watch, to mark time. to find their place within the turning of the heavens. The land around the circle bore witness to this continuity. Burials multiplied, barrows rising like gentle humps upon the earth. Each mound held bones, tokens of lives once lived, laid close to the stones, as if to remain forever near their watch. When travellers crossed the plain, the barrows spoke as loudly as the circle itself, silent monuments to generations who had honoured the stones. The builders were long gone, but their presence lingered in every detail. The stones they had placed with aching hands still stood, weathered but strong. The alignments they had chosen still guided light across the seasons. The memory of their effort, though unspoken, was carried in the silence of the circle. Their lives might have been brief, their voices unheard, but through the stones they endured. And so new stories grew, tales of giants who had carried the stones from distant mountains, legends of sorcerers who had commanded them into place with spells, myths of gods who had descended from the sky to shape the monument with their own hands. Each story was different, but each circled the same truth. The stones were not ordinary. They held a power that could not be denied, a mystery that demanded explanation. Around evening fires, these stories were told and retold. Children leaned close to hear of the stones walking at night, of spirits dancing in their shadows, of whispers that could be heard if one pressed an ear against their cold surfaces. Adults spoke more carefully, weaving meanings of fertility, of death, of healing, of protection. The circle belonged to all, and so its meaning became as vast as the people who touched it. Travelers from far-off lands continued to come, bringing with them gifts and questions. Some stayed for days, lying on the grass within the circle, gazing at the stars as though waiting for an answer. Others left quickly, overwhelmed by the weight of silence. Still, each left a trace, a footprint in the soil, an offering at the base of a stone, a story carried home to distant valleys, and through all of this, the stones remained. They did not move, though myths claimed they could. They did not speak, though countless ears strained to hear. Their silence was their gift. In their stillness, people heard themselves. In their endurance, they saw the thread of continuity that ran through their own fleeting lives. Generations passed, and still the circle endured. The builders' names were forgotten, their faces lost, their huts vanished into earth. Yet the stones they had raised continued to stand against the horizon, unbroken, unchanged in their essence. And in this way, the builders lived on, their story whispered not in words, but in presence. Imagine, even now, walking across the plain. The grass bends beneath your feet. The wind brushes your face. The stones rise slowly into view, tall, ancient, steadfast. As you step into the circle, silence wraps around you. You feel the weight of centuries pressing close, not as burden, but as embrace. You are not alone. You are surrounded by the voices of all who came before, by the builders whose hands once strained against ropes, whose breath once rose in the cold air of dawn. The monument speaks without speaking. It reminds you that time is vast, that lives are brief, that meaning is found not in permanence, but in connection. The builders are gone, yet they remain. You, too, are part of this circle now, your presence added to the endless rhythm of stone and sky. The stones wait still, patient as they have always been. They will wait long after our own voices fade, long after our own steps are gone. They will remain when new generations come to wonder, to question, to imagine, and in that endurance lies the gift of the builders. a monument not to themselves, but to time itself, to the eternal turning of earth and sky, to the endless story of humanity. The stones stood unchanged, though centuries had rolled past like clouds across the sky. Around them, kingdoms rose and fell, fields were ploughed and abandoned, forests were cleared and grew back again. Yet the circle endured, holding its silence as faithfully as ever. To those who passed across the plain, the stones seemed eternal, untouched by the fragility that claimed all else. By the time new ages dawned, the names of the builders were long gone. No one remembered the effort of dragging stone across miles. No one recalled the songs sung as ropes tightened, but absence of memory only deepened the mystery. For those who gazed upon the circle, the question of who had built it became more than history. It became myth. In the long halls of medieval storytellers, the monument became a place of magic. Some said giants had lifted the stones, carrying them across seas with strength no human could match. Others whispered of wizards, of powerful figures, who commanded earth and sky, who placed the circle with hidden purpose. To many, the stones were not the work of mortals at all, but a relic of gods, left behind to remind humankind of powers greater than themselves. Travelers on horseback paused to stare. Pilgrims walking from shrine to shrine turned their eyes toward the horizon where the circle rose. Shepherds guiding flocks along the grass told their children that the stones were alive, that they moved at night when no one watched, that if one dared to count them, the number would always change. Stories multiplied, weaving the monument deeper into the imagination of the age. Yet even as tales grew fanciful, the stones themselves remained unchanged. Their presence needed no explanation. Their silence was explanation enough. People felt it when they stepped between the uprights, when the wind moved around them, when shadows shifted across the ground. The circle had no need to justify itself. It simply was, and in its being, it stirred wonder. Kings and lords heard of it. Scholars wrote about it. Monks debated its origins, pointing to scripture, to lost peoples, to vanished empires. But no theory was complete. Each idea only deepened the mystery, reminding all who asked that the stones belonged to no single story. They belonged to time itself. Seasons turned as they always had. Winters froze the grass. Summers ripened it. Rains fell, soaking the plain. And sunlight returned, gilding the stones with gold. Birds nested in their cracks, lichen spread across their surfaces, yet their shapes remained. They were older than the oldest memory, and they promised to outlast every new one. Generations passed through the circle. Lovers met in its shadow, promising their lives to one another. Mourners carried their grief there, whispering prayers no one else could hear. Wanderers sat in the grass, staring at the sky, letting silence wash over them. Each life touched the stones briefly, then moved on. The stones endured, waiting for the next dot, and so the monument became more than a ruin, more than a puzzle. It became a mirror. Those who came saw their own longing reflected back at them. Longing for meaning, for continuity, for something greater than the span of a single human life. Whether they believed in giants, or gods, or forgotten ancestors, each visitor left with the same impression that they had stood in the presence of something beyond themselves. As the centuries edged closer to our own time, the circle entered. New eyes, explorers measured its height, its span, its alignment. Antiquarians traced its shadows at solstice, wondering what the builders had intended. Writers described it in books, sketching its outlines, trying to capture on paper what could only truly be felt in silence. Still, the deeper they studied, the greater the mystery became. Stonehenge, as it came to be named, could not be confined to explanation. Each theory, each drawing, each attempt at description left something out: the sense of stillness, the breath of wind, the weight of ages pressing softly from all sides. Scholars saw geometry, but wanderers still felt magic. Farmers saw a circle of rocks, but poets heard music in their silence. And so, even in an age of reason, the monument remained more than reason. Its mystery was not diminished by study, but heightened. To stand within it was to feel history beneath one's feet, to sense voices behind the silence, to recognize that some questions are too vast for answers. Modern lives came rushing in, carrying noise and speed, but still the stones stood quiet. Cars passed along distant roads, planes crossed high above, yet within the circle, time slowed as it always had. Visitors stepped through, and in that instant, the modern world seemed to pause, leaving only sky, stone, and the endless turning of the earth. The builders were gone thousands of years, yet their presence lingered, not in name, not in record, but in the endurance of their work. They had lifted stone against impossible odds, and in doing so, they had carved a place where silence speaks louder than words. Each person who comes to the circle, whether pilgrim or tourist, dreamer or scholar, joins that lineage. Each footstep adds to the story. Each breath joins the rhythm. The stones do not reveal their secrets. Perhaps that is their purpose. Perhaps their gift is not in explanation, but in wonder. To stand before them is to feel small, but also to feel part of something immense. To touch their surface is to touch time itself, to recognize that lives are brief but meaning can endure. And so the circle waits, as it always has. It waits for those who will come tomorrow, and for those who will come long after tomorrow has passed. It waits for footsteps yet unmade, for prayers yet unspoken, for stories yet untold. The builders may be gone, but their song continues, carried in the silence of the stones, whispered across centuries, waiting for each of us to hear. The circle stands in the present as it has in every past age, steady against the horizon, surrounded by fields that shift with season but never erase its outline. The world around it has changed beyond recognition. Villages have grown into towns. Roads have cut across plains. Towers of glass and steel now rise in distant cities. Yet within the quiet of the circle, time seems unchanged. Visitors arrive from across the world, their journeys measured in hours, their lives carried by the rhythm of machines and noise. They step down onto the grass, expecting only to see old stones, but something else begins to happen. The rush of the world softens, the silence of the plain opens wide, and the stones begin to speak not in words, not in sound, but in presence. People approach carefully, slowing without realizing, as though the weight of centuries presses against their shoulders. They walk between the uprights, lay their eyes upon the lintels above, trace the weathered surface with fingertips. Some feel awe, others curiosity, others only a gentle calm that they cannot name. Whatever they feel, it is enough. The circle accepts all, without demand, without judgment. In the hush of early morning, when mist curls along the grass, the stones rise like giants wrapped in clouds. In the bright clarity of noon, their shadows cut sharp lines upon the earth, marking the steady path of the sun. At twilight, they fade into silhouettes, black against the sky painted in amber and violet. And at night, beneath the sweep of stars, they seem to join the heavens. as if the circle were a mirror of the constellations above. Visitors pause in these moments, breathing deeply, listening to the stillness. Some close their eyes, let in the cool air carry them inward. Some lie upon the grass, feeling the heartbeat of earth beneath their backs. Some simply stand in silence, their busy thoughts quieting one by one until nothing remains but the stones and the sky. The circle does not answer questions, yet it soothes them. Those who come searching for meaning may not find explanations, but they find rest. Those who come burdened with noise and worry discover stillness they did not know they craved. The stones do not speak, yet they give voice to peace. It is in these quiet moments that the builders live again, not in body, not in name, but in the calm their monument provides. They could not have imagined the shape of the modern world, the machines, the lights, the endless speed. Yet they gave us a gift perfectly suited for it, a place where time pauses, where the endless turning of the earth feels steady, where silence wraps like a blanket around weary minds. Even now, the solstices bring gatherings. Crowds assemble at dawn, waiting for the first line of sunlight to strike the heelstone. Voices rise, songs are sung, drums echo against the plain. Yet beneath the noise, the silence remains, deeper than any sound. The stones hold steady, receiving the light as they always have, offering the same lesson. Seasons return, time turns. Nothing is ever lost. For those who come alone, away from the festival days, the circle offers something more intimate. To stand there in solitude is to feel oneself dissolve into the vastness of time. The worries of a single life grow small against the scale of centuries. The breath slows, the heart calms, and the stones remind us that we are part of something much larger, something enduring. The grass continues to sway as it has for millennia. Birds trace their paths overhead, circling, landing, lifting again. The wind whistles low, carrying scents of soil and rain. All the while, the stones stand silent, yet their silence is not empty. It is full of memory, of presence, of countless lives that have touched this ground. Some visitors speak of feeling watched within the circle, but not with unease. Rather, they sense company, as though invisible hands still rest upon the stones, as though voices too ancient to hear still murmur in the air. The builders are not gone. They are in every shadow that falls across the lintels, in every glimmer of sun that breaks between uprights, in every breath drawn within the circle. And so, even today, the monument fulfills its purpose, though we cannot define what that purpose is. It is a place of rest, of memory, of wonder. It is a place where the ancient and the modern meet, where lives long finished brush against lives just beginning. It is a place that asks nothing but presence, and in return it gives peace. The circle does not end with the past. It lives in the present and will move into the future, carrying with it all who step inside. Long after our own voices are gone, long after our names are forgotten, the stones will remain. They will continue to greet the solstice sun, to hold the winter dawn, to bear the rhythm of earth and sky. They will wait, as they always have, for those who come seeking silence, seeking meaning, seeking rest, and so, in their presence, we too become part of the story. We join the builders, the travelers, the mourners, the dreamers. We add our breath to the countless breaths that have filled the circle. We place our footsteps upon the same ground, leave our own silent mark upon the same stones. The circle holds us all, then lets us go, sending us back into the world with a quiet reminder that time is vast, That silence heals, that endurance is beauty. The stones wait still. They will wait tomorrow. They will wait for centuries yet to come. They will wait for the footsteps of people not yet born, who will walk the same path, feel the same stillness, hear the same silence. And in that silence, the story continues without end, without beginning, like the circle itself, eternal beneath the sky. The stones remain, holding their silence across all time. They have outlasted the hands that raised them, the voices that sang around them, the lives that once gathered in their shadow. Yet their gift is not in the mystery of their making, but in the calm they offer to those who pause, even now. Upon the plain dot, as night deepens and the air cools, the monument fades into silhouette. Stars awaken above, countless in number, spread across the sky as though the heavens themselves were another great circle. The stones, steady and dark, seem to lean upward, joining that endless dome. To stand here is to feel the earth breathing beneath you, the sky breathing above you, and yourself caught softly between the two. Every sound falls away until only the faintest rustle of grass remains. Wind brushes against the stone, low and steady, like the memory of voices too ancient to hear. In this stillness, time seems to fold. The builders are not gone. They are here, not in body, but in the silence they left behind. Their hands shaped the monument, but their true gift was the space it creates, space for quiet, for stillness, for the slowing of thought. And so the circle does what it has always done. It waits, it listens, it invites those who enter to rest. There is no demand to understand, no need to solve its purpose. The mystery is not meant to be unraveled, it is meant to be felt. The gift of the stones is not knowledge, but peace. The grass bends in the night wind. A bird stirs once, then grows still. The air holds a coolness that settles gently upon the skin. Each breath drawn here is slower, deeper, easier. Each step is softer. The world outside, full of noise and urgency, begins to fade. Within the circle, only presence matters, the simple act of being, of breathing, of allowing the silence to wrap around you. Many have stood here before. Many will stand hereafter. Their lives will differ, their stories will change, yet each will feel the same quiet pulse. Each will know, if only for a moment, that they are part of something vast. The stones do not speak of endings, they speak of continuance, of cycles, of the turning of earth and sky, still. For each who comes, there is a moment when they must leave. They step out from the circle, return to the path, and carry the silence with them. The monument does not hold them. It gives them back to the world, carrying a piece of its calm within. That calm lingers long after, echoing softly, reminding them of the night when the stones and stars were one. And so the circle endures. It endures for the builders, for the countless unknown who walked the plain before us. It endures for us now, and for those yet to come. It endures not because it must, but because it can, because silence is stronger than time, because stillness is eternal. The story of the stones does not end here, for the circle has no end. It is a ring, endless, complete, unbroken. Yet for us, the telling must fall quiet. The words grow slower, softer, as though they too are settling into rest. The stones stand steady. The sky moves gently. The earth turns without haste. And you, here in this silence, are part of it all. Let the calm of the circle be yours. Let the breath of the night guide you. Let the weight of centuries lift away until nothing remains but peace. The circle is still. The night is vast. You are safe within. Both. The story rests now, as you rest.